deep beneath the Himalayan peaks, in a laboratory that existed outside of conventional space-time, the master of mankind, the Emperor, stood before his greatest and most secret work. He was a giant clad in his golden Baroque Oramite power armor, his features a mask of serene, focused concentration. Before him, a great archway of impossible metal shimmered, not with light, but with a controlled, stable tear in the fabric of reality. This was the Imperial Webway, his answer to the Chaos Gods, his grand project to liberate humanity from the tyranny of the warp. He was a scientist on the verge of his ultimate breakthrough, a rational god preparing to impose a perfect, logical order upon a galaxy of screaming madness. He reached out with his mind. It was a force that dwarfed suns, a psychic sun of pure, focused will, designed to map the labyrinthine corridors of this alternate dimension. He pushed, gently, into the veil, his consciousness, a golden thread seeking a path, his mind, a beacon of pure scientific order, brushed against something. It was not the familiar, gibbering, chaotic rage of the archenemy. It was something else. A single, focused point of immense, cold, and ancient malice. A will steeped in deceit, dominion, and a dark, spiritual magic that felt utterly alien to his own psychic science. In that infinitesimal moment of contact, he felt this other will in the very act of exerting its power, a spike of cold, necromantic energy. In a different reality, in a land of endless, frozen night, the Night King, a being of ancient, patient magic, stood on a clifftop and raised his arms, his blue-lidded eyes closed. Below him, in the aftermath of a great battle, lay the bodies of 10,000 slain wildlings. He exerted his will, and a wave of blue necromantic energy washed over the battlefield, a power to conquer death itself. The two forces, the Emperor's radiant, ordered probe and the Night King's cold necromantic pulse, collided across the dimensions. The feedback was instantaneous and cataclysmic. The two systems were fundamentally, cosmically incompatible. The Night King's magic was a song of ice and death. The Emperor's power was a science of psychic fire and order. They did not mix, they reacted. A violent feedback loop erupted. The stable, shimmering arch in the Emperor's laboratory shrieked. The controlled tear in reality tore open, becoming a chaotic, screaming vortex of gold and icy blue. The Emperor, caught at the epicenter, was engulfed. His psychic wards, which could hold back the fury of the Chaos Gods, were momentarily shattered by a power that did not play by their rules. He felt his physical form, the body he had crafted and perfected over 30 millennia, being dematerialized, torn apart, and pulled through the wound in space-time. He was adrift, a golden god, lost in the blind, non-existent spaces between realities. His rematerialization was not gentle, it was a crash. His golden armored form, wreathed in streamers of residual psychic fire, was violently ejected from the collapsing vortex. He slammed into the soft, frozen, yielding earth of a snow-covered forest. His body, a 2-foot-tall, multi-ton projectile, carving a perfectly straight, 100-meter-long, smoking furrow. He had landed in the haunted forest, north of the wall. The Emperor's arrival was not merely a physical impact, it was a psychic detonation. His rematerialization, a godlike will of pure order and power slamming into a world of subtle, song-based magic, sent a shockwave across the continent. It was a silent, blinding flash on the spiritual plane, a new, rival sun igniting in the sky. In the lands of always winter, the Night King stumbled, his hand flying to his chest. He had felt it, an anathema, a golden, burning, psychic presence that was not of the sun, not of fire, but something else, something utterly hostile to his own icy, necromantic nature. He had just felt a true rival, a god of fire, arrive in his kingdom. In Ashai, Melisandre, her ruby pulsing, gasped as she was blinded by a vision of a golden, 2-foot-tall god, his sword ablaze, a true Azor Ahai, a being of such power that her Lord of Light seemed but a pale, flickering candle in comparison. In the heart of a weirwood grove, Bran Stark, his mind adrift in the streams of time, was violently thrown from his warging. He saw it, a golden, blazing sun of pure, unbending order that had just slammed into the world, utterly silent to his physical senses but a deafening, reality-shattering roar to his psychic ones. Daenerys's dragons, miles away in Mirren, shrieked and recoiled, their flames sputtering, sensing a new, true apex predator entering the world. The Emperor of Mankind pushed himself to his feet. His golden armor was unscratched. He stood, a 12-foot giant, and surveyed the new, primitive world. His psychic senses, his primary tool, swept across the globe in a single, processing instant. Atmosphere, breathable. Gravity, standard. Population, human, primitive, feudal state. Contaminants. His senses recoiled. The very air was thick with magic, a low-level, chaotic warp field, and it was infested. Primary threat. He felt the source of the cold, necromantic pulse that had pulled him here. A major psychic entity, controlling an army of reanimated corpses. Classification. Necromantic. Demonic entity. Archenemy. Priority. Exterminatus. Lesser threats. He felt the whispers of R'hllor, the drowned god. Classification. Minor. Parasitic warp entities. Asterisk xenosignatures. Multiple. Children of the forest. Diminished. Irrelevant. Giants. Abhuman. To be purged. Asterisk. Humanity. Fractured. Primitive. Superstitious. Status. In need of imperial compliance. He had his mission. He would purge the primary demonic threat, then he would unite this lost human world. He did not have to wait. The disturbance of his arrival had drawn the local enemy. From the snow-covered pines, they emerged, a horde of rotting, blue-eyed corpses, their bodies clad in furs, their hands clutching crude weapons, whites, and leading them, a tall, graceful, and utterly inhuman figure of blue, ice-like flesh, and ancient, knowing eyes. A White Walker. The Emperor regarded the demonic entity. It raised its crystal sword. He did not even draw his own weapon. He unleashed his will. A wave of golden, psychic fire. His anathema washed over them. The whites incinerated, their bodies dissolving into ash, their necromantic blue light extinguished instantly. The White Walker, a being of ancient, powerful magic, was met with a force it could not comprehend. The golden light struck it. It was not burned. It was unmade. Its ice magic shattered. Its physical form dissolved. And its soul, its very essence, was erased from existence. The Emperor had just fired his first shot. The psychic death scream of the White Walker, a creature of pure, cold magic, was a high, thin, silent wail that lanced across the frozen north. It was a note of pure, unadulterated wrongness that was felt by every magical being on the continent. The Night King, in his fortress of ice, felt one of his sons vanish, not just killed, but erased, and his ancient, cold mind felt a flicker of something he had not felt in millennia, doubt, and Melisandre of Ashai felt it as a call. The being of fire she had sensed was now purging the darkness. He was the one. Azor Ahai. He had come. She was a dragonstone, her faith in her king, Stannis, wavering. She had seen only snow and failure in her flames. Now, she saw a new, golden, all-consuming sun. She performed a ritual, a plea to R'hllor, and in a cloud of shadow and flame, she traveled, sacrificing a year of her own life force to project herself across the world. She materialized in the haunted forest, her red robes a stark contrast to the snow and ash. She fell to her knees, her body trembling, not from the cold, but from the sheer, overwhelming, radiant power of the being before her. The Emperor stood over the smoking remains of the White Walker, his golden armor radiating a tangible, physical heat. He turned his luminous, inhuman gaze upon her. Classification. Human. Unsanctioned psyker. Taint. Extreme. Affiliation. Worshipper of a parasitic warp entity. Aralar. Melisandre looked up, her eyes wide with a fanatic's ecstatic joy. My king, she breathed. My lord, you have come. The Lord of Light has sent you. You are Azor Ahai reborn, the warrior of fire, the one who will save us." She bowed, pressing her forehead to the frozen, ash-covered ground. "I am your servant. Command me." The Emperor regarded the kneeling, red-robed woman with a cold, analytical disgust. He had scanned her mind the moment she appeared. He saw her rituals. He saw the leeches. He saw the shadow demon she had birthed, an act of demonic copulation and sorcerous assassination that represented the pinnacle of heretical corruption. "You serve a lie," the Emperor's voice boomed, a sound that shook the very trees. "There is no Lord of Light. There is only the great enemy, the daemon, the parasite that whispers promises to fools like you in exchange for your soul. You are not a prophet. You are a slave." Melisandre looked up, her face a mask of shocked, wounded disbelief. "No, it cannot be. The Lord is the one true God, he showed me. He has shown you nothing but illusions," the Emperor stated. He strode to her, his 12-foot form a golden mountain of judgment. "You are a human psyker of significant, if uncontrolled, potential. You have been corrupted. You will be cleansed." He raised his golden gauntlet. Melisandre, in a flash of terror, tried to summon her flame. To protect herself, a pathetic orange flicker died in her hand, utterly snuffed out by his overwhelming psychic presence. He placed his hand on her head. Melisandre screamed. It was not a fire she felt. It was a sun. A sun of pure, absolute, and righteous order. The Emperor's will, his anathema, poured into her. He seized the psychic, spiritual tether that bound her soul to her Lord of Light. He found the dark, fiery pact she had made, and he burned it. He did not just burn her, he burned the god out of her. In the distant, fiery heart of Reller's realm, the Lord of Light itself recoiled, roaring in agony as its connection to its most powerful servant was not just severed, but cauterized, its tendril of power annihilated by a golden, holy fire that was utterly alien to its nature. On the ground, Melisandre convulsed. The ruby at her throat, the source of her unnatural, preserved youth, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The illusion of her beauty, a gift from her god, vanished. Her skin withered, her hair turned a brittle, snowy white. Her body contorted, her bones shrinking, her youth and power draining away in an instant. The Emperor lifted his hand. He was no longer looking at a powerful witch. He was looking at a terrified, gasping, skeletal old woman, a creature of 400 years, her true withered age now revealed. "Your god is gone," the Emperor said, his voice cold. "You are free. A true human death awaits you." He turned his back on her, leaving her to die in the snow, her faith, her magic, and her life all broken, and began his march south. He had a wall to cross. The Emperor of Mankind moved through the haunted forest, a golden juggernaut, his path a perfectly straight, unwavering line. He was a being of pure, logical purpose. The primary threat source, the entity the locals called the Night King, was to the north. His sensors, now recalibrated to this world's primitive energies, could feel its cold, necromantic heart. He would march there, and he would purge it. His path led him to the wall. He stood at its base, a 12-foot giant in golden armor, and looked up. The structure was impressive, 700 feet of solid ice, stretching from horizon to horizon. He analyzed it. A primitive, but effective, fortification. Its true strength, however, was not the ice. He could feel the ancient, dormant magic, warp energies, woven into its foundations, a psychic barrier designed to repel the necromantic taint of the White Walkers. A fascinating, if crude, application of psychic architecture. It was also in his way. Atop the wall, at Castle Black, the alarms were sounding. The crows, their black cloaks flapping in the wind, stared in disbelief. A lone figure, shining like a star, was approaching the wall from the north. It's not a walker," one of the watchers stammered, his hands trembling. It's gold." Alistair Thorne, acting Lord Commander, snarled. "A trick, a warg, a giant. It matters not, It comes from the north. It is the enemy. Archers, knock! A volley of arrows, some tipped in dragonglass, rained down from the 700-foot-high perch. The Emperor did not even look up. The arrows entered his passive, blazing aura and were incinerated in mid-air, turning to ash 100 feet above his head. Thorn stared, his bitter, hateful certainty momentarily shaken. Archers, knock again. Fire! Fire! They fired again. And again. The arrows were useless. He's just walking, a crow whispered, his voice filled with religious terror. The Emperor reached the base of the wall. He did not look for a gate. He did not seek to climb. The wall was an obstacle. Obstacles were to be removed. He raised his golden, gauntleted hand. He placed it, almost gently, against the ancient, magical ice. He was not just a warrior. He was the master of mankind, a being of unimaginable scientific and psychic knowledge. He did not need to melt the wall. That would be inefficient, messy, and would take time. He would simply phase it. He focused his will, his psychic power, his mastery of the material laws of the universe. He did not attack the wall. He spoke to its molecular structure. He commanded the H2O molecules to move. The Night's Watch, staring down, gasped in horror. A perfect, 2-foot-tall, 8-foot-wide archway was opening in the solid, 700-foot-thick wall of ice. The ice was not melting. It was not cracking. It was simply moving aside, reforming the wall's structure, creating a perfect, smooth, and utterly impossible tunnel. The ancient magic of the wall, the spells of Brandon the Builder, screamed in protest as they were casually, contemptuously overwritten by a power that was not of their world, a power of pure, scientific, psychic will. The archway was complete. The Emperor stood at the northern entrance, a golden figure in a tunnel of blue, ancient ice. He looked through, to the lands of the south, to the lands of men, and then he stepped through. He emerged on the southern side of the wall, his armor undimmed. He left behind a perfect, gaping, and utterly indefensible archway in the most formidable structure on the planet. At Castle Black, Alliser Thorne, Jon Snow, and the other members of the Night's Watch fell to their knees. They were no longer guarding a wall. They were witnesses to a god. Their entire 8,000-year-old purpose had just been rendered obsolete in the span of 30 seconds by a being who hadn't even acknowledged their existence. The Emperor stood on the soil of the Seven Kingdoms. He looked north, at the primary threat. And then he looked south, at the secondary problem. The primitive, chaotic, squabbling humans he had come to save. He would deal with the Night King first. It was the logical priority. He turned his back on the new, gaping hole in the wall and began his march back into the true north. The Emperor of Mankind marched north, a golden sun against a world of ice and death. His psychic senses, now fully attuned to this reality's frequencies, were locked on to the primary threat source. A single, vast, and ancient mind, radiating a cold so profound it was a psychic black hole. The Night King. He walked for days, or perhaps it was weeks. Time was an irrelevant concept to him. His armor provided full life support. He did not need to eat or sleep. He simply walked. He was an unmovable, unstoppable object, marching on a trajectory of absolute, divine purpose. He crossed the frozen seas. He climbed the jagged, ice-encrusted mountains of the lands of always winter. He came to a place that was not on any human map, a vast, circular plateau of pure, blue ice, like a frozen arena at the very heart of the world's cold. In the center, on a throne of ice, sat the Night King. He was not alone. His entire army, the full, unbridled might of the long night, was assembled. Tens of thousands of wights, their blue eyes burning, 100 skeletal giants, their forms draped in frozen, rotting furs. And in a silent, elite circle around their king stood his honor guard, the last of the White Walkers, their crystal swords held at the ready. The Night King had felt the golden god's approach. He had felt the annihilation of his servant. He had felt the psychic burning of the wall's magic. He, who had never felt anything but cold, patient certainty, now felt a new, unfamiliar emotion: wariness. This was not a man. This was not a child of the forest. This was his equal, his opposite, the god of fire. He rose from his throne as the emperor strode into the ice arena. He raised his arms. The sky, which was already a dark, swirling gray, turned black. A blizzard, a storm of impossible, magical cold, descended, a wall of ice and wind designed to flay flesh from bone and freeze a man's soul. The emperor flared his psychic shield. A dome of pure, golden light erupted from him. The blizzard, the magical, soul-chilling wind, vaporized as it hit the shield. The snow turned to steam. The ice shards melted in mid-air. The Night King's ultimate storm was rendered as harmless as a summer breeze. The Night King faltered, his blue eyes widening in what might have been shock. He pointed his crystal sword at the emperor. The army of the dead charged. A wave of 10,000 screaming, rotting corpses, a tide of death that had shattered the armies of the first men, surged across the ice. The Emperor of Mankind did not move. He simply raised his gauntlet. "You are an abomination." His voice boomed, a psychic shockwave that momentarily halted the charge. "You are a plague of the soul. You are a heresy against life itself. You will be cleansed." He unleashed his will. He did not unleash a beam or a blast. He unleashed his aura, the anathema, the sun of the psyche. A dome of pure, golden, annihilating light erupted from his form, expanding, washing over the battlefield. It was not fire. It was purity. It was the very concept of order and life made manifest as a weapon. The whites, creatures of pure, necromantic energy, were the first to die. The light touched them, and their blue-eyed malice was extinguished. Their bodies, no longer animated by the Night King's will, simply collapsed. They did not burn. They just stopped, falling into piles of inert, rotting bones. The White Walkers, the generals of the army, met the light, and their ice armor shattered. Their crystal swords exploded. Their ancient, magical forms, which could not be harmed by normal steel, were unmade. They shrieked, a high, thin sound of glass breaking, and dissolved into a shower of fine, icy dust. Their very essence, their cold, magical souls, were erased. The Night King, his entire army, his entire 10,000-year-old plan, annihilated in a single, silent, golden flash, was left alone. He stood before the Emperor, a being of pure, cold magic, facing a being of pure, hot, psychic will. The Night King, in a final, desperate act, hurled his ice spear, a weapon that had slain a dragon. The Emperor caught it. He caught the magical, ice-tipped spear in his golden gauntlet, the ice hissing and melting against his divine heat. He crushed the spearhead in his fist. "Your long night," the Emperor stated, his voice a cold, final judgment, as he strode towards the now unarmed and utterly powerless Night King, "is over." He placed his hand on the Night King's shoulder. The golden, psychic fire flowed. The Night King did not just shatter. He burned. He was incinerated from the inside out. His soul, his magic, his very concept, erased from the memory of the world. The 10,000-year-old threat to humanity was ended in less than 5 minutes. The Emperor turned his back on the field of inert corpses and began his march south. The primary threat was neutralized. It was time to deal with the secondary problem, humanity itself. The Emperor returned to the wall. The Night's Watch, who had been in a state of terrified, religious paralysis since he had melted a gate in their unbreachable fortress, saw him return. They saw the golden god walk out of the now silent, no longer haunted forest, his armor undimmed. "The threat, is it gone?" a trembling Maester Aemon asked from the wall's base. "The primary demonic threat has been neutralized," the Emperor's voice boomed. "The long-term mutant infestation is purged. This sector is now secure." He strode past them, ignoring their prostrations, their whispers of the smith and the warrior made flesh. He was followed. a vast, shambling, silent army of wildlings who had witnessed the golden light from afar, had seen the eternal wrongness of the North vanish in an instant. They, who followed only strength, had found the ultimate strong man, Tormund Giantsbane, his eyes wide with a superstitious awe he would never admit to, led his people not as refugees, but as the first, willing subjects of their new god-king. The emperor marched south, his new, barbarian army in his wake. His destination, the seat of northern human power, Winterfell. He arrived to find the castle in the midst of a brutal, primitive battle. The snow-covered fields were a sea of chaos, as the army of the traitor Starks, led by Jon Snow, clashed with the army of the corrupted Boltons, led by Ramsay. The emperor watched the battle for a single, analytical moment. He saw the flayed man banners, the snarling dogs, the sheer, chaotic inefficiency of it all. He saw two primitive tribes of humanity tearing each other apart, while the true threats to their species had been at their very doorstep. He was disgusted. "Cease this primitive squabble," his voice boomed, a psychic shockwave of pure command that washed over the battlefield. Every soldier, Stark, Bolton, Umber, Karstark, stopped. They froze, their swords in mid-swing. Their minds were seized by a will so vast, so absolute, that their own hatred and loyalty were rendered meaningless. As one, both armies, tens of thousands of men, turned and knelt. They knelt in the snow, their heads bowed, their wills no longer their own. The emperor strode onto the field, a golden god in a field of silent, kneeling warriors. He marched to the command tents. He found Ramsay Bolton, his face a mask of shocked, pale fury. "Who are you?" Ramsay shrieked, his dog voice returning. "Release them. I am the Lord of The emperor looked at him. He scanned him. Classification. Extreme chaotic mutation. Sadistic psychosis. Genetic deviancy. Verdict. Unfit for integration. To be purged. He did not use his sword. He simply willed it. Ramsay Bolton's body collapsed, his mind instantly and permanently erased, leaving a drooling, mindless, empty husk. He then turned to Jon Snow. He scanned him. Classification. Human. Pure strain. His hidden Targaryen blood read as noble stock. Strong genetic potential. Taint. Xenosympathizer. The wildlings. Verdict. Flawed, but a usable asset. Jon Snow. The emperor's voice was not a question, but an appointment. You have loyalty, you have strength, but you are deluded by primitive sentiment. I am freeing you. Your loyalty is no longer to your failed house. It is to me, to mankind. He placed his hand on Jon's head. Jon cried out as a wave of golden, painful light flooded his mind. He saw it all. The emperor's truth, the glory of the Imperium, the threat of the Xenos, the sin of the heretic. His old, noble beliefs were burned away, replaced by a new, cold, and absolute certainty. When the emperor lifted his hand, Jon Snow rose. His eyes, once full of doubt and honor, were now cold, clear, and filled with a terrifying, fanatical light. "My lord and emperor," Jon said, his voice a low, hard monotone. "I see the truth. The North is yours." "It is," the emperor confirmed. "You will be my lord governor of this new imperial province. Your first task, integrate the wildling savages. Your second, prepare your armies. We march on the south." With the North pacified and compliant under the new iron-fisted rule of his lord governor, Jon Snow, the emperor of mankind turned his vast, psychic senses to the rest of the planet. He had neutralized the demonic threat in the north and the mutant threat at Winterfell. Now, he had to classify the remaining powers, the Xenos and the heretics, to finalize his grand strategy of unification. He stood on the highest tower of Winterfell, a golden, 2-foot-tall statue of pure power, the cold, northern winds whipping his crimson cape. He closed his eyes and looked. His mind, a psychic sun, swept across the globe. He saw the world, not as a map of continents, but as a tapestry of psychic energy, of faith, and of life. He felt the kingdoms of men to the south, a fractured, terrified, and leaderless mass. Status, primitive, superstitious, ready for compliance. He felt the pockets of remaining greenskins, the orcs, a chaotic, disorganized, and soon-to-be purged infestation. He felt the small, dwindling pockets of the children of the forest and the remaining giants. Classification: minor xenos. Irrelevant. Their presence would be erased in the final cleansing. And then, his senses brushed against the true xenos threat. He felt the ancient, powerful, and deeply alien minds of the elves, hidden in their enclaves of Rivendell and Lothlorien. He felt their magic, a subtle, passive, warp-based energy that he identified as a dangerous, corrupting influence on the local human populations. They were hoarding knowledge. They were stagnating. They were a xenos race that had outlived its purpose, and their continued existence was a threat to humanity's manifest destiny. But it was across the narrow sea, in the lands of Essos, that his gaze hardened, his cold, logical fury finding its true focus. He felt her, a young, human female, radiating an immense, chaotic, and utterly unstable psychic signature. She was fireproof, a clear sign of aberrant, uncontrolled mutation. She was a psyker of immense, raw potential, but utterly without discipline, her mind a swirling vortex of arrogance, misplaced destiny, and sentimental, emotional folly. And she was not alone. He felt the minds of her children. 3 massive, predatory, and scaled things. They were not of this world's fauna. They were xenos. Predatory xenos fauna of the most dangerous, reptilian avian class. And this unstable, human psyker had bonded with them. She was a xenos handler, a heretic of the most profound and disgusting order. He watched, with his psychic sight, as she used these xenos beasts to wage her own, primitive, moral crusade, freeing slaves, disrupting the local economic order, and burning cities. She was an agent of pure sentimental chaos, a destabilizing force in a world that craved order. He classified her instantly. Designation: Daenerys Targaryen. Classification: Hereticus Majoris. Unsanctioned psyker, mutant. Xenos sympathizer and handler. Threat level: extreme. She was not just a threat. She was an abomination. A perversion of the holy human form, allied with alien monsters, seeking to impose her own, emotional, and illogical will upon the world. He felt the other, lesser threats in Essos, the warlocks of Karth, a cabal of rogue psykers, trafficking with demonic entities. The faceless men of Bravos, a heretical death cult, a clear violation of the imperial creed. His strategic calculation was finalized: consolidate the human continent of Westeros, purge the southern Daemon Lord, Sauron a secondary but significant threat, unite all of human-occupied territory, launch the final, great crusade against the Xenos Queen and her beasts in Essos. The Xenos handler, Daenerys Targaryen, had just made herself the primary, long-term enemy of the new, rising imperium of man. Her doom was sealed. It was merely a matter of logistics. The unification of Westeros had to be swift. The Emperor had no time for the primitive, inefficient process of war. He would not march. He would not besiege. He would strike. He stood in the great hall of Winterfell, his Lord Governor Jon Snow at his side. The Southern Kingdom, the Emperor's voice boomed. This, King's Landing, is a nest of corruption and failed leadership. It is the heart of this continent's sickness. We will cut it out. Jon Snow, his mind now a cold, logical, and fanatical reflection of his new master, nodded. The city is walled, my Emperor. Lord Lannister holds the crown. Their army is irrelevant, the Emperor interrupted. He had no patience for a discussion of soldiers and walls. He turned to Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. Since the cleansing of Theoden, they had been his guests' prisoners, in truth. He had kept them alive because their minds were interesting. Gandalf was a warp entity of a unique, non-hostile class. Aragorn was pure strain human stock, a genetic prize. The elf and dwarf were Xeno specimens, to be studied before their inevitable purge. "You will accompany me," he commanded. "You will bear witness to the coming of true imperial order." He reached out his will. He seized the 6 of them, Jon, Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and himself in a bubble of telekinetic force. He focused his mind on the Red Keep in King's Landing, a location he had pinpointed from the minds of the Rohirrim. He teleported. Reality tore. The frozen gray stones of Winterfell vanished, replaced by a momentary, agonizing golden void. They rematerialized, in a flash of blinding, golden light and a crack of displaced air, in the very center of the Red Keep's throne room. The court of King Joffrey Baratheon was in session. The hall was filled with sycophants, lords, and ladies. Cersei Lannister sat on a smaller chair near the throne, a smirk on her face. Tywin Lannister stood, a tall, imposing figure of cold authority. And on the Iron Throne itself, a monstrous, ugly, and inefficient chair of spikes and blades, sat the boy king, Joffrey. He was in the process of ordering his Kingsguard to beat a serving girl. The golden, 2-foot-tall, godlike warrior and his 5 stunned companions, appearing from thin air in a flash of divine light, brought the entire court to a dead, terrified silence. Joffrey's mouth hung open. Cersei gasped. Tywin's hand, for the first time in his life, visibly twitched. The Kingsguard, Meryn Trant and Boros Blount, reacted with the dull, reflexive instinct of their station. They drew their swords. "Treason! Seize them!" They charged. The charge of the 2 Kingsguard knights was a pathetic, almost comical display. They were fat, slow, and steeped in a corruption that was not just spiritual, but physical. They waddled, in their heavy, enameled armor, towards the 2-foot-tall, golden demigod. The Emperor of Mankind did not even look at them. He held them fast with a simple, contemptuous, telekinetic thought. The 2 knights froze in mid-stride, their swords held uselessly in the air. Their armor began to groan, to buckle, to crush inward under the invisible, immense pressure. They gurgled, their bones snapping, and collapsed to the floor in a heap of ruined, wheezing, crushed metal. Silence. Utter, abject, terrified silence. The Emperor's gaze, luminous and inhuman, lifted from the broken knights and settled on the boy on the Iron Throne. Joffrey, his sadism replaced by a sudden, panicked, childish terror, shrieked, "Kill him! I'm the king! Kill him! I'll have all your heads! Guards! Guards!" The remaining Lannister soldiers and City Watch guards in the hall looked at their king. They looked at the golden god who had just crushed 2 Kingsguard knights without moving. They did not move. The Emperor began to walk forward, his golden boots a thunderous, echoing thud on the stone floor. Each step was a judgment. He was a glacier of pure, righteous order, and he was advancing on the mewling, chaotic child who dared to call himself a king. He stopped at the foot of the Iron Throne. He looked up at Joffrey, his mind a cold, analytical scalpel. Classification: human, high nobility. Analysis: genetic deviancy, product of incest. Extreme mental instability, sadistic psychosis. Chaotic deviant. Verdict: failed leadership, corrupted stock, unfit for integration, to be purged. "I am the king," Joffrey screamed, his voice cracking, as he pulled a crossbow from under his throne, his hands fumbling with the mechanism. "I am the king. You are a disease." The Emperor's voice boomed, a sound that shattered the high windows of the throne room. He did not use his hand. He did not use his sword. He simply willed it. He focused his psychic might on the boy king. Joffrey froze, the crossbow dropping from his nerveless fingers. His eyes widened, his mouth opened in a silent, final scream. The Emperor did not burn him. He did not crush him. He executed him with a simple, terrifying imperial efficiency. He imploded his head. There was a sudden, wet pop, and King Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name, ceased to exist. His body, headless, slumped sideways on the throne, a fountain of blood erupting from its neck, washing over the throne of blades. Cersei Lannister let out a high, thin, keening wail, a sound of a mother's, and a queen's ultimate despair. Aragorn, Gandalf, and the others watched in absolute, stomach-churning horror. This was not justice. This was not war. This was an extermination. This was a god cleaning a house of pests, and he had just, quite literally, swatted the fly. The great hall of the Red Keep was a vortex of silent, paralyzed terror. The lords and ladies of the court were frozen, their minds unable to process the divine, casual, and utterly brutal regicide they had just witnessed. Cersei's wail had died in her throat, her face a mask of pale, vacant shock. Only one man in the room was not paralyzed. Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King, the true ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, was a man of pure, cold, pragmatic logic. He had just watched his king, his grandson, be executed by a 2-foot-tall, golden being that had teleported into the room. He did not feel grief. He did not feel rage. He felt a profound, cold, and absolute understanding. The game he had played his entire life, the game of thrones, of houses, of gold, and of armies, was over. It was a children's game. And a true, terrible, and adult power had just walked onto the board, kicked over all the pieces, and declared itself the winner. The Emperor of Mankind turned his gaze from the headless corpse of Joffrey. He looked at the Iron Throne, this grotesque, asymmetric, and utterly primitive chair, this symbol of the world's chaos. He was disgusted. He strode up the steps, his golden boots stepping over Joffrey's remains. He placed his gauntleted hand on the throne's back, on the tangle of melted, jagged swords. His hand glowed with an internal, white-hot heat. The Iron Throne, the symbol of the Targaryen conquest, the chair that 1,000 lords had lusted for, began to melt. The ancient, dragon-forged steel hissed, glowed red, then white, and dissolved under his psychic, molecular-level assault. It became a molten, slag-like puddle of liquid metal. The court gasped. The Emperor did not stop. He held his hand over the molten puddle, and his will, a force of pure, creative order, began to reshape it. The metal twisted, cooled, and reformed. It was no longer a chair of chaotic spikes. It was a new throne. Simple, massive, severe, and forged of a gleaming black and gold alloy that had never been seen before. And on its high, imposing back, he had seared his own personal sigil, the imperial Aquila, the two-headed eagle. He had erased their history and replaced it with his own. He turned and sat. He sat on the new, black, imperial throne, a 2-foot-tall golden god, his flaming sword now appearing in his hand, its blade of pure, psychic fire casting a warm, terrible light over the hall. He unleashed his will, not as a weapon, but as a broadcast. A psychic wave of pure, undeniable, and absolute authority washed over the entire city of King's Landing. Every man, woman, and child in the city, from the lowest beggar in Flea Bottom to the highest septon in the Starry Sept, stopped. They looked up, their minds filled with a single, new, and absolute truth. "Your gods are false," the Emperor's voice boomed, not in their ears, but in their very souls. "Your kings are failures. Your primitive traditions, your petty, squabbling houses, are over. I am the Emperor of Mankind. I have come to save you from the darkness, and from yourselves. Your new age has begun. An age of order, an age of truth, an age of compliance. You will kneel, you will know peace, and you will obey." In the throne room, Tywin Lannister, the most powerful, pragmatic man in Westeros, the man who had never knelt to anyone, looked at the golden god on the new, black throne. He looked at the smoking, headless corpse of his grandson. He looked at the end of his world and the beginning of a new one. He understood. He made the only logical, pragmatic choice left. He dropped to one knee. "My Emperor," he said, his voice a low, cold, and utterly beaten monotone. "What is your will?" The Emperor had just conquered the Seven Kingdoms. It had taken him less than 10 minutes. The news of the Golden Emperor's arrival spread across Westeros with the speed of a psychic shockwave. It was not a rumor. It was a conversion. His psychic proclamation from the new, imperial throne of Terra Secundus, as he had now designated the planet, had been a wave of pure, undeniable truth to the simple human minds of the peasantry. They did not just fear him, they worshipped him. A new, instant, and fanatical religion was born in a single day. The seven, the old gods, the drowned god, they were all forgotten. Pale shadows next to the real, one 2 foot tall, golden, living god who had incinerated the false king and ended the war. By the time Daenerys Targaryen's fleet, 1,000 ships strong, arrived at Blackwater Bay, she was not arriving as a liberator. She was arriving as a heretic. She stood on the deck of her flagship, her silver hair whipping in the wind. She looked at King's Landing, and she was confused. The city was not flying the Lannister banner. It was not flying the Baratheon stag. It was flying a single, massive, and unfamiliar banner, a golden, 2-headed eagle on a field of black. The city was orderly, clean. The gates were open. There was no chaos. The people moved through the streets with a strange, silent, disciplined purpose. "What is this?" she murmured to Tyrion, who stood beside her, his own face a mask of profound confusion. "What new game is Cersei playing?" "This is not Cersei's work," Tyrion said, his keen mind sensing a logic that was too cold, too efficient for his sister. "This is something else." Daenerys's patience, always thin, snapped. She had come to take her birthright. She would not be denied by a new, strange banner. "Dracarys," she whispered. Drogon, perched on the battlements of the Red Keep where he had landed, unleashed a torrent of black and red fire at the gate. A shield of pure, golden light, shimmering and vast, flared to life over the Red Keep, swallowing the dragon fire harmlessly. Daenerys's blood ran cold. "You have come, Xenos Queen," a new voice boomed, seeming to come from the sky itself. A golden figure materialized in a flash of light on the battlements, 100 yards from her. He was 2 feet tall, his armor blazing, his psychic presence a wave of heat that made her dragons hiss and recoil in primal, instinctual fear. They were apex predators. They had just met a galactic apex predator. "You are the Emperor," Daenerys called out, her voice trembling but defiant. "You are the usurper. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the rightful queen of the 7 kingdoms. Leave my city, or you will be burned." The Emperor regarded her. Classification: Hereticus Majoris, unstable psyker, Xenos handler. Verdict: primary threat to human purity, to be purged. "You are an unstable, mutant psyker, in league with Xenos fauna," the Emperor's voice replied, a sound of pure, cold judgment. "You are not a queen. You are an abomination, and your birthright is a primitive delusion. I have already claimed this world in the name of mankind. Your beasts will be put down, and you will be cleansed." Daenerys, in her Targaryen fury, would not be threatened. "I am the mother of dragons," she screamed, "and I will take what is mine with fire and blood." She gave the command, "Dracarys." The command was given. It was an act of ultimate, fiery defiance. Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, the unburnt, unleashed her children, her living weapons of mass destruction, upon the golden god who had dared to usurp her. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, who had been perched on the battlements, recoiled from the Emperor's sheer, psychic presence. But their bond with their mother was absolute. They rose into the sky as one, a storm of leathery wings and scaled fury. They attacked. The sky above Blackwater Bay turned into an inferno. The 3 dragons, now fully grown, unleashed a combined, apocalyptic firestorm. Drogon's black and red fire, Rhaegal's emerald green, Viserion's cream and gold. It was a torrent of fire so vast, so hot, it could melt stone and steel. The entire, massive, upper bastion of the Red Keep was engulfed in a sea of flame. Daenerys's army, the Unsullied, the Dothraki cheered. Nothing could survive such a fire. Her victory would be swift. The firestorm raged for a full, terrible minute, and then it parted. Like a curtain being drawn, the flames tore apart, bending, fleeing from a central point. The Emperor of Mankind stood, in the heart of the inferno, utterly untouched. His golden, psychic void shield shimmered around him, a dome of pure, absolute will that the dragon's fire could not even register against. He stood, his armor undimmed, his face a mask of cold, analytical disgust. Primitive, carbon-based, flame projection, he stated, his voice a low, booming analysis of the creature's weaponry. Inefficient. Daenerys stared, her heart stopping. Her ultimate weapon, her children, their fire, the fire that had conquered continents, was useless. The Emperor looked up at the three massive Xenos beasts who were now circling in the sky, hissing in confusion, their fire spent. "You are a plague," he said, his voice rising in judgment. "A Xenos infestation upon a human world. The sentence is death." He raised his golden gauntlets. He did not fire a weapon. He did not need to. He seized them. He reached out with his mind, with the full, crushing, telekinetic might of a being who could move starships. He seized all three dragons in the air, in an invisible, inescapable grip of pure, psychic force. Drogon, the largest and strongest, roared in pure, shocked agony. His wings beat furiously, but they were useless. He was held fast, as if the sky itself had turned into solid stone. Rhaegal and Viserion shrieked, their bodies twisting, their flight instantly arrested. "No," Daenerys screamed, her face a mask of pale, horrified disbelief. "No, let them go." The Emperor ignored her. He held the three greatest, most feared Xenos beasts in his galaxy in his invisible, psychic grip, and he clenched his fist. It was not a gentle death. It was a judgment. There was a simultaneous, terrible, wet, crushing sound that echoed across the bay. Drogon's skull, thicker than a castle wall, imploded. Rhaegal's wings were torn from his body by the sheer, twisting force. Viserion's spine was snapped in a dozen places. They were not just killed. They were broken. They were crushed. Three massive, lifeless, broken forms, their fire extinguished forever, fell from the sky. They crashed into the waters of Blackwater Bay, the impact a series of three colossal splashes. A final, tragic end to the Targaryen line. Daenerys Targaryen let out a high, thin wail of pure, soul-shattering grief, and she collapsed, her mind, her army, her world broken. The Xenos threat was purged. The Emperor of Mankind stood on the battlements of the Red Keep, a golden, 2-foot-tall god of absolute, terrifying order. His new, imperial world was almost clean. The demonic threat of the Night King was erased. The mutant threat of the Orcs and Uruks was broken, their primitive masters purged. The heretical human leadership of the Starks, Boltons, and Lannisters was subjugated, their false kings dead. The Xenos threat of the dragons was annihilated. But one, final, insidious taint remained. The very air of this world was sick. It was infested with the warp, the primitive, chaotic, belief-based magic that had caused all this instability in the first place. He felt the lingering, parasitic whispers of the Lord of Light. He felt the cold, wet, mindless pull of the drowned god. He felt the ancient, dying, Xenos taint of the old gods in the weirwood trees. He felt the residual, necromantic energy of the shadow curse, the chaotic energies of the warlocks, the death cult of the faceless men. These were not just beliefs. They were minor, parasitic, psychic phenomena. They were infections in the soul of humanity, preventing this world from achieving its true, glorious, rational destiny. He would not just purge the priests, he would purge the gods. From his new, black, imperial throne in the Red Keep, he closed his eyes. He reached out, not with a physical hand, but with his full, cosmic-scale, psychic consciousness. He did not just scan the planet, he enveloped it. His mind, his will, his anathema, became a golden, psychic dome around the entire globe, and he unleashed a single, silent, planet-wide pulse. It was not a pulse of fire or destruction. It was a pulse of pure, absolute order, a reality stabilization wave. A psychic reset that declared, with the force of a god, that the laws of this world would no longer be the laws of magic. They would be the laws of reason. His reason, the unraveling began. Across the entire planet, magic, which was just a low-level, chaotic, belief-based manifestation of the warp, died. In the north, in the god's wood of Winterfell, the great ancient weirwood tree, its face carved by the children of the forest, suddenly wept a torrent of red, viscous sap. Its pale white leaves turned black and crumbled to dust. The old gods, the collective, primitive, psychic consciousness of the forest, was silenced. In the Iron Islands, the drowned gods' priests, in the middle of a ritual, found their god was gone. The sea was just water. The wind was just air. Their prayers were just words. In Ashai and across Essos, the red priests and priestesses of Roller, who were gazing into their fires, suddenly saw nothing. The flames no longer held visions. The Lord of Light, his connection to this reality severed by the Emperor's greater, more orderly power, was gone. The fires were just fire. The warlocks of Karth found their magic gone, their illusions fading, their powers inert. The House of the Undying imploded, its psychic foundations erased. The faceless men found their ritualistic, divine magic of assassination no longer worked. The Emperor had not just killed the gods, he had unplugged them. He had cleansed the planet. He had scoured it of all Xenos, all mutants, all heretics, and now all magic. He had fixed it. He opened his eyes. The world was now silent, clean, orderly, rational. A perfect, primitive, human world, ready to be uplifted. He stood up from his throne. His great crusade for Terra Secundus, his new, personal imperium of man, could now, finally, truly begin.